Welcome everyone, Christine here with the video on the Witcher Netflix series timeline, because it is a bit confusing, quite a bit confusing, watching the TV series and trying to understand exactly when is everything taking place. So this has led Netflix to come up with their own timeline. They first released a picture. Now they've released an interactive timeline on the witchernetflix.com, which you can check out, link in the description. And I'm going to explore about that, give some comments on things, talk about how line is it with the canon of the books. Now, mind you, I'm not someone who knows everything perfectly, so I might miss a few things, but I do know quite a bit about what's supposed to be there. But anyway, let's begin. So we get started with the conjunction of the spheres, inexplicable event that led to the arrival of humans and monsters on the continent, leaving the land forever changed. Now it's worth understanding here that yes, the conjunction of the spheres certainly did happen. It's where monsters were created. What's significant here is to say is that elves, because obviously this is in relation to elves, although they were already there on the continent, they were not the original people on the continent. That goes to dwarves and a couple others. Elves themselves came from another land. So the conjunction of the sphere is basically year 0 in the Witcher universe. Then we get to 786, which is the birth of Striga. Now Striga is a sorcerer who appears in the short story where Geralt earns the title the Butcher of Blaviken, the lesser evil. It's also what he deals with in the first episode of the Netflix series. But he doesn't really, at least as far as I know, he doesn't really play any significant role after that, if any role after that. So they made Striga more important in the show, at least in the first season. We'll have to see how that pans out for the next season or future seasons, because I imagine there's going to be quite a few of them. But anyway, 786, Striga is born. And he's quite old by that. The laws of magic, the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, is established, and its first members draft the laws of magic, dictating how chaos should be used. It's interesting to use the term chaos in reference to magic, to the power, to the source, basically, because that's not something I've ever seen in the books or the game, so it's a interesting tidbit, an interesting change there in terms of how magic is changed in the Netflix series, though not necessarily for the best. So 839, the laws of magic, the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, sorry, I struggle with this, is established, and also in 839, Arethusa, the Academy, is established, opened by Larissa de Winter. Okay, so that's 839. Then we get the creation of the first Witcher in 967, because in the Witcher series there's monsters, but early on, as humans arrived, there were significantly more monsters. So to deal with them, mages created Witchers to fight the continent, and this is at Kaer Morhen. So like if you look at these kind of events, like this is Arethusa, and that's also in of course Velen. This in Sidoris, basically that's Redania, that's Temeria. And here we have Kedwen, and that's Kaer Morhen. So the Kaer Morhen is created. I don't know if Kaer Morhen really was the original place where all the Witchers were created, because there are different Witcher schools, not just the School of the Wolf. But, don't complicate things. It's created at Kaer Morhen, which I imagine we'll be seeing in the next season quite quickly. But anyway, we begin with 1160, the birth of Geralt. Now, what's missing here is this timeline has the birth of Striga, but what about Tissaia de Vries? So, anyway, Geralt is born in 1160, and in 1187, the beginning of the Great Cleansing. Elves taught humans how to master chaos and use its power to perform magic. In return for their lessons, human slaughtered the elves. Pretty much what happened, though, obviously there's political affairs. It was a war between humans and elves, and the elves ultimately lost. So 1187, the elves get slaughtered by the humans, and then we go to 1192. Yennefer is born. So difference of 32 years between Geralt and Yennefer. And Geralt's timeline is here in orange, Yennefer is in purple, makes sense. And then we move on to 1206. Tissaia recruits Yennefer to study the magic at Aretuza. Yennefer being recruited and being purchased really for less than the price of a pig by Tissaia de Vries, the one in charge of the academy. So Yennefer, when she's quite young, actually, like when she's 14 years old, is recruited at the Aretuza Academy. And then in 1210, Yennefer approaches Gilfillan, asking him to perform her enchantment against the wishes of the Brotherhood. So that's when she transforms in 1210, and in 1210 as well, at the royal ceremony. It's interesting, like, there's such a space because basically these events took place hours apart. The time has come for Aretuza's apprentices to meet the kings and queens they'll serve. So this gives you an episode guide as well. So episode 2, like, Yennefer is born here. This is in episode 2, and this is in episode 3, and also in episode 3 here as well. Over here. Now, in 1213, the Curse of the Black Sun, a seemingly ordinary solar eclipse, viewed by some mages and monarchs as a dark omen. The Curse of the Black Sun is a big part of the story where Geralt earned the title the Butcher of Blaviken. It's also something, if you play The Witcher 1, there's a DLC, an adventure there, where they also deal with that curse in a different fashion. It relates to one of the Witchers, Eskel, who is one of the Witchers of the School of the Wolf, who probably should appear in the next season. But anyway, the Curse of the Black Sun is that there were certain girls that were born cursed, basically, by this Black Sun, and princesses specifically. And Striga decided to take action against that, to deal with that. Renfri is born during the Curse of the Black Sun, Renfri being the person that Geralt has to deal with in the first episode at Blaviken. Now, Calanthe is born in 1216, so we have Renfri 1213, Calanthe in 1216, the Queen of Sintra sharing a border with the south. Then we have Jaskier, 1222. So Jaskier is, 30 years old, give or take, I guess, by the time the season ends, pretty much, I guess. Anyway, Dandelion. Striga is born a cursed child, presumably conceived by Temeria's king, comes into the world after its mother has died. And this is the actual Witcher short story involves the Striga born in 1229, due to the incestuous relationship between King Foltest of Temeria and Ada, his sister. So anyway, 1229, 1230, Calanthe ascends to the throne. The late King Dagorat leaves the Cintran throne to his then 14-year-old daughter Calanthe, so at a very young age she ascends to the throne. The Battle of Hukabaz, the Cintran queen defeats the Nazair military, earning the moniker the Lioness of Sintra. So Nazair is part of Nilfgaard, or what people would come to know as Nilfgaard, though it's worth knowing that Nilfgaard did expand significantly, specifically after Emir Varam Rhys, who they call the White Flame in the series, took the imperial throne. They even have Nilfgaard not being called an empire, but a kingdom, which I think is completely inaccurate. But anyway, in 1231, so in 1231, in the same year, because it's mentioned in episode 1, the Butcher of Blaviken, refusing to choose the lesser evil, Geralt must fight Renfri and thus receives the moniker the Butcher of Blaviken from the ungrateful townsfolk that he had basically saved by fighting and killing Renfri and her men, and also from the ungrateful Striga who wanted to dissect her corpse. If I remember correctly, I haven't read the story in a while. I don't think Striga was the one that basically made so that Geralt was shunned. It was, in the books, you have the Alderman. He's an actual character there, and he's the one that turns against Geralt. And the villagers themselves turn against Geralt, not Striga. Calanfe marries Ragnar. The Lioness of Sintra finds her queen and the king in the form of Ragnar of Ebbing. Ebbing, I think it's a kingdom or a portion anyway. A location. It's a location anyway. Sintra's king is saved. Queen Ragnar is rescued by Lord Urchuan of Erlenwald. In return, Urchuan requests the law of surprise as payment. There's a lot of things that go into here. Suffice to say that Dunny planned it in a sense. At least that's the impression that was given. At least that's what I remember. That planned the sequence of events given who he actually is and the role that he ultimately plays in the whole universe. Pavetta is born in 1234. So in 1233, what would be interesting as far as I see it with this timeline, like, yeah, there's stuff here that obviously is important. It would be nice to know, like, hey, when is Dunny born? You don't need to say who he actually is. We get the point. You know, that's a major spoiler. But you can reveal when he's born, and that would actually be important. But anyway, Pavetta is born in 1234, right? And in 1237, the Striga attacks some years after the death of Princess Ada. Temeria is stirred up by an inexplicable murder. So in 1237. So that's what? 10 years, give or take, isn't it? Yep, less than 10 years from when she was born. The Striga starts attacking, where we get to and Nilfgaard progresses north. Nilfgaardian forces take Ebbing, starting a war that would wage 40 years to come. So Nilfgaard starts expanding, and Nilfgaard is here to the south, and they start, and imagine that, the Nilfgaard is to the south, here is Sintra, that's where Nilfgaard is, so it was a vast expanse. What's interesting is that Calanfe married someone from Ebbing, so the kingdom of Ebbing, when in the series she calls, she mocks Nilfgaard. She genuinely mocks Nilfgaard in the TV show, making it the piss water of the South, basically insulting them like that. But her husband was also from the South. Interesting tidbit there. The Edge of the World, episode 2. Geralt and Jaskier first meet. They set out to capture a monster, but end up being caught themselves by the elves. That's where they get introduced. That's where they meet the elves. Yennefer, escaping the Ronin mage, the rogue mage, basically. Ronin, obviously, from Japan, interesting term to be used. Episode 4, Yennefer is en route to Lyria with Queen Callis and an infant princess when they fall under attack. What's this with Lyria? That's the weird part. Because Aedirn is its own kingdom. Why is Yennefer of Vengenberg, the advisor to the king of Aedirn? Because she was assigned to Aedirn. Why is she protecting the queen here? Or at least, the impression I'm getting reading this is like, was she the queen of Lyria? Really? I'm sure Queen Meve would have few words to say about that, but she probably comes in later. Anyway, the Striga occurs on the road. Geralt meets Trismerigold. She has a task for him. Find and save the creature that has been tormenting Temeria for years. So we're talking here from 1237 to 1243 in episode 3, that the Striga has been haunting Temeria. So, episode 4, and this is when Geralt deals with the Striga, rescues her and all that. So wait, 1243, alright, so 1243, it's really weird. The reason I want to mention this is because Foltest, his actor, is pretty bloody old. Or he's a bit too old to make sense. And I mentioned that because Foltest, the actor they cast for Foltest might as well worked for someone like Henselt. So that's the Striga. Yeah, I mean, he shouldn't be too old even in this. Like, what the hell do they do with Foltest? Anyway, 1249, the Last Surprise. Geralt claims the Last Surprise and knowingly turns his back on Destiny. So that's when the events in Sintra take place. That's when, when Geralt meets Dunny, meets Pavetta, helps Dunny out, asks for the Law of Surprise, and through that, he has a claim to Ciri. as his child of surprise. So 1239, Sintra celebrates a double wedding. Same episode. Pavetta and her betrothed, the Urchan, are joined in matrimony. On the same night, East convinces Calanth to take his hand in marriage. Now, there's a lot of detail missing here, but East was basically the brother of Skellige being right here. Now, East would, and this is King Bran. If you've played The Witcher 3, King Bran, you go to Skellige, you go to King Bran's funeral. Now, East was his brother. East actually became king of Skellige at one point from his brother. Don't quite know how that happened. And together, he and Calanfe basically had the Sintra and Skellige alliance. In fact, that was the whole point of what Calanfe was trying to do. She was trying to secure an alliance by marrying Pavetta to Krakon Crate. Yes, that Krakon Crate from The Witcher 3. At least in the Netflix series. Anyway, so 1250, the birth of Ciri. So pretty much less than a year later, Pavetta gives birth to Ciri, Geralt's child of surprise, the daughter of Dunny, and the daughter of Pavetta of Sintra. And we then skip to 1256. So wait, Ciri is born in 12. Okay, so we have the Last Wish, episode 5. Geralt and Yennefer fates are intertwined when they encounter a djinn and fight for its wishes. So that's when Geralt meets Yennefer. That's when they go through that whole drama in Rind, and where Geralt makes his last wish to basically be with Yennefer always. That was Geralt's last wish. That's why they're together. It seems a bit insane as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Yennefer, you can have whatever opinions you want about her, but she really doesn't come off in a very positive light in the episode. What the hell was Geralt thinking? I don't know. And she doesn't come off in a very positive light in the books either, in that particular short story, in The Last Wish. I mean, The Last Wish is the collection of short stories, but it's also the short story in itself where those events are dealt with. But anyway, so 1262, so we go from 1256 to, 6 years later, after Geralt and Yennefer meet, the dragon hunt. Geralt and Yennefer join opposing teams in a dragon hunt and learn the reason why they haven't been able to escape one another. And Yennefer is quite pissed off and basically abandons Geralt, after they had gotten closer during the hunt. Regarding the hunt, just want to mention something regarding that Witcher hunt, that dragon hunt in the show. There were a lot more characters. It was a lot grander, and there were quite a few changes. There were quite a few changes specifically with Ike of Denel, who actually did, in the books, one of the amusing things is that he actually does try and fight the dragon, Villentret. He tries and fight him while mounted. He charges with him, gallops at full speed, mounted on a horse in full armor, and Villentret just tosses him around, basically. Just an amusing tidbit. But yeah, there were a lot more people. So anyway, after the events of 262 with the dragon hunt, pretty much a year later, Geralt returns to Sintra, where he tries to claim Ciri. So 1263 from 1249 and 1250. Okay. So Ciri is 13 years old at this point, right? The Battle of Marnadal Valley. Sintra's outnumbered army led by Calanfe and East fights a losing battle against Nilfgaard same year. Magical gathering, Yennefer is tricked into returning to Aretuza, where the Brotherhood of Sorcerers is meeting for the liberations that would seal Sintra's fate. So at about the same time that Sintra is falling, at the Marnadal steps right here, the border between Nilfgaard and Sintra. And in the show, they show it as an open plain. It's not really that. It's a natural choke point, and that's why Calanfe fought there. But anyway, at the same time that's going on, the Brotherhood meets, and they decide not to help Sintra. At least they vote on that. Sam makes a different decision, but anyway. While that's happening, Sintra is slaughtered. This is all happening in episode 1. Nilfgaard breaches Sintra's borders, threatening to destroy the entire city and kill everyone within its walls. So it was 1263. Episode 2, Revolt in the Refugee Camp. Ciri finds herself in the safety of a Sintran refugee camp, but is forced to leave during a bloody revolt. What the hell? That's a weird thing. So 1263. How does that make sense, really? A revolt. That's scary. Is this in line with the book timeline? Because, like, it felt a heck of like... Wasn't Nilfgaard? I need to check the episodes, but I'm pretty sure it was Nilfgaard that was attacking them in that refugee camp. And you need to mention it, because you see where Brokilon is? Like, this is consistent with the lore. So we have Sintra here, Brokilon here, Sodden over here. That's kind of consistent with the lore. So anyway, Ciri enters in 1263 in Brokilon and drinks from their waters. Now she would have she forgets in the books. But anyway, as Ciri is forced to defend herself, she unleashes a power she never knew she possessed. So episode 7, when she's being cornered by a bunch of boys, she had played with them on the streets of Sintra, but they have turned against her, so she unleashes her power, basically kills all of them, and falls unconscious. Reminds me of what happened in The Witcher 3 at Cameron. But anyway, episode 8, Geralt is escaping the ghouls from amidst the remains of a Sintran refugee camp, and he gets bitten. But a man named Yurga gets him to safety. And then we get to the Battle of Sodden Hill. Now, the thing that's inconsistent significantly, so in the show, the inconsistency, the big inconsistency, right, is that the reason the Battle of Sodden Hill happens, specifically where 20 mages try and hold back the tide of Nilfgaard, is because Cahir, who's commanding the Nilfgaardian forces in the vicinity, decides he needs to take Sodden to cross the Yurga, the river separating Sintra from Temeria, right? But here's the problem, that Ciri had entered Brokilon, had gotten out of Brokilon, and this is pretty much like, this is Verdun, Maribor, this is like Temeria. So the whole Battle of Sodden, it's kind of like stretched. The timeline doesn't quite make sense. The actions don't really make sense of the Nilfgaardians. I mean, if he's really so desperate to cross the Yurga, take Sodden, which is the natural choke point, the ancient elven fortress, then why? Then how come he was already here and near Brokilon, and all those events were taking place? It just is something difficult to make sense of. But anyway, it ends in 1263, where Geralt and Ciri meet in a forest near Sodden Hill. And Yennefer also disappears at about this time. Now, the thing about the Battle of Sodden Hill, in the show they make it a battle like a bunch of peasant refugees that decide to make a stand, and the mages brought out by Tisea, whereas in the lore it was a battle involving basically all the northern kingdoms. Probably took over, the timeline was probably a bit different as well, and it did involve Temeria, Redania, Kedwen, Edirn. So all the major northern kingdoms fought at Sodden to stop Nilfgaard's advance, which they did temporarily. That's when you could say the first Nilfgaardian war ended, so to speak. Anyway, it's a nice timeline. It doesn't necessarily dive into all of those events, and does leave some things unanswered. And it's consistent with the information we know from the books. It's consistent with the information on Wiki. It's consistent with other maps. But the problem is it highlights the inconsistencies from the show to the actual lore. Like, there aren't necessarily that many inconsistencies, to be clear. Just, Sodden is really the big one. Some missing characters and all that, but yeah, the Sodden situation is really the big one. Anyway, Quasine here, signing out. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Special thanks here to Alain, to all my patrons, and to all of you who make this possible.